A new lesbian love story, Claire and Evelyn. A forbidden love that feels like destiny. Claire's wedding dress, hung on the back of her childhood bedroom, door like a ghost of the future she was supposed to want. Its ivory silk catching the afternoon light in a way that made her stomach turn with dread rather than anticipation. In 3 days, she would walk down the aisle toward Daniel, the man her family adored, the man who checked every box on paper, the man she had convinced herself she could love if she just tried hard enough. But then Evelyn had appeared at her engagement party the night before, her cousin's new colleague, a woman with storm gray eyes and an easy confidence that made the air feel charged with electricity. And in the span of a single conversation about architecture and dreams deferred, Claire's carefully constructed life had begun to crumble like a building with a flawed foundation. Now she stood at her window watching Evelyn's car pull away from the house, and she knew with a certainty that terrified her that she was about to make a choice that would shatter everything, or live a lie that would slowly kill the truest part of herself. If you believe that everyone deserves the courage to live authentically, that love sometimes arrives at the most inconvenient moments, and that second chances are worth fighting for even when the cost is high. Please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to channel name. Your support helps us tell stories that matter, stories about people finding the strength to choose truth over comfort. Claire had always been the good daughter, the reliable one, the girl who colored inside the lines and never caused her parents a moment of worry. She had excelled in school, earned her degree in graphic design, accepted Daniel's proposal after dating him for 2 sensible years, and planned a wedding that would make her mother proud. On the surface, her life looked perfect, a testament to careful planning and appropriate choices. But beneath that polished exterior, Claire had spent 28 years feeling like an actress playing a role she hadn't auditioned for, saying lines that didn't quite fit in her mouth, moving through scenes that belonged to someone else's story. She had learned to ignore the hollow feeling in her chest when Daniel kissed her, had convinced herself that the absence of passion was simply maturity, that real love was supposed to be comfortable and predictable rather than consuming. She had almost succeeded in believing her own performance until Evelyn walked into her parents' backyard carrying a bottle of wine and wearing a leather jacket that shouldn't have worked with the elegant garden party atmosphere but somehow did. Evelyn was everything Claire had been taught not to be. At 32, she had walked away from a lucrative career in corporate law to pursue her real passion for restoring historic buildings, a decision that had disappointed her own family but filled her with a vitality that was almost visible. She moved through the world with an unapologetic authenticity that drew people to her like moths to flame. She laughed loudly, spoke her mind without calculation, and carried herself with the kind of confidence that comes from knowing exactly who you are and refusing to apologize for it. When Claire's cousin introduced them, explaining that Evelyn had recently moved to town to work on the restoration of the old courthouse downtown, their handshake had lasted a moment too long, their eyes holding in a way that made Claire's heart stutter with recognition and fear. They had talked for hours at that engagement party, standing near the rose bushes as the celebration continued around them, the sounds of laughter and congratulations fading into background noise. Evelyn spoke about buildings, the way poets speak about love, about the stories hidden in architecture, about the tragedy of watching beautiful structures crumble from neglect, about the profound satisfaction of bringing something back to life that everyone else had written off as beyond saving. Claire found herself confessing dreams she had buried years ago, about wanting to start her own design studio focused on sustainable community projects rather than corporate branding, about feeling trapped in a life that looked right but felt wrong, about the terrifying suspicion that she was about to make the biggest mistake of her life. She didn't mention her wedding specifically, but Evelyn's eyes had flickered to the engagement ring on Claire's finger, and something unspoken had passed between them, an acknowledgement of barriers that existed but didn't feel as solid as they should have. When Daniel had appeared to claim his fiancée, placing a possessive hand on Claire's lower back and steering her toward relatives who wanted to toast the happy couple, Claire had felt Evelyn's gaze on her back like a physical touch. She had turned once to look over her shoulder, and Evelyn had still been standing by the roses, her expression impossible to read, but her eyes holding a question that made Claire's breath catch in her throat. That night, lying beside Daniel in the bed they already shared in preparation for their imminent marriage, Claire had stared at the ceiling and acknowledged a truth. She had been running from her entire life. The emptiness she felt wasn't about Daniel specifically, or about cold feet, or about normal pre-wedding jitters. It was about the fundamental fact that she had never felt for any man what she had felt in those few hours. Talking to Evelyn, that electric sense of connection, that feeling of being truly seen, that dangerous flutter of possibility that felt like standing at the edge of a cliff and wanting to jump. The next morning, Claire told her mother she needed to run errands for the wedding, and instead found herself driving to the old courthouse where Evelyn was working. She told herself she just wanted to see the restoration project, that she was interested in the architecture, that this was perfectly innocent. But when she walked into the gutted interior of the building, sunlight streaming through empty window frames and dust motes dancing in the air, and saw Evelyn standing on scaffolding with blueprints spread before her, Claire knew she was lying to herself. Evelyn looked down, and their eyes met across the cavernous space, and the smile that spread across the other woman's face was equal parts surprised and knowing, as if she had been expecting this, even though it shouldn't have been expected at all. They walked through the building together, Evelyn pointing out original details that had been hidden under decades of unfortunate renovations, explaining her vision for bringing the structure back to its former glory, while making it functional for modern use. Claire listened and asked questions, but beneath the conversation about crown molding and load-bearing walls, something else was happening. They stood closer than necessary. Their hands brushed when Evelyn passed her a fragment of original tile she had uncovered. When Evelyn reached out to steady Claire on an uneven floor, her hand lingering on Claire's elbow, the touch sent electricity coursing through Claire's entire body. They ended up sitting on the courthouse steps, supposedly taking a break, but really just existing in each other's presence in a way that felt more intimate than anything Claire had ever experienced with Daniel. Evelyn was the one who finally acknowledged what was happening between them. She spoke carefully, her voice gentle but honest. She told Claire that she recognized the look in her eyes because she had seen it in her own mirror years ago when she was trying to force herself to be someone she wasn't to please her family. She explained that she wasn't going to make assumptions about Claire's situation or her feelings, but that she needed Claire to know something important. Whatever was happening between them felt significant to Evelyn, but she wouldn't be part of helping Claire run from her life or make choices she wasn't ready to make. If Claire needed to go through with her wedding to try to make her current path work, Evelyn would respect that and step back. But if Claire was feeling what Evelyn suspected she was feeling, then she owed it to herself and to Daniel to get honest before making vows she would regret. The words hit Claire like a bucket of ice water, forcing her to confront what she had been avoiding. She drove home in a daze, her mind racing with thoughts she had spent her entire life trying not to think. She had always known on some level that she was different. There had been intense friendships in high school that felt like more than friendship. There had been actresses and musicians she admired in ways that seemed to go beyond normal appreciation. There had been moments in college when she watched certain women and felt something shift in her chest that she quickly buried under layers of denial and distraction. She had dated men because that was what was expected, had accepted Daniel's proposal because he was kind and stable, and marrying him seemed like the next logical step in a life lived according to other people's scripts. But Evelyn had cracked something open inside her, and now Claire couldn't close it again no matter how hard she tried. The following day was a blur of wedding preparations that felt increasingly surreal. Claire went through the motions, confirming the caterer, picking up the programs from the printer, smiling through a bridesmaid brunch while feeling like she was watching herself from a distance. Daniel sensed something was wrong and attributed it to pre-wedding stress, pulling her close and assuring her that everything was going to be perfect, that their life together would be everything they had planned. His words, meant to comfort, only intensified Claire's panic. That night she lay awake, beside him, listening to his peaceful breathing, and felt tears sliding down her temples into her hair. She was about to marry a good man she didn't love the way he deserved to be loved. She was about to commit to a lifetime of pretending, of performing, of slowly suffocating under the weight of expectations and the prison of her own fear. The morning before the wedding, Claire made a decision. She drove to the courthouse again, her heart pounding so hard she felt dizzy. Evelyn was there, of course, and the surprise and concern on her face when she saw Claire's expression made something in Claire's chest crack wide open. They stood facing each other in that empty building, and Claire finally spoke the truth she had been terrified to acknowledge. She told Evelyn that she couldn't marry Daniel, that she had been lying to herself for years. That meeting, Evelyn had been like waking up from a dream she hadn't realized she was having. She confessed that she was terrified and had no idea what came next, but that she couldn't walk down that aisle and make promises she knew she couldn't keep. She said that she didn't know what was happening between them or where it could go, but that even if nothing came of it, Evelyn had given her the gift of clarity about who she really was and what she really wanted. Evelyn crossed the distance between them and took both of Claire's hands in hers, and the gesture was so tender and grounding that Claire started to cry in earnest. Evelyn told her that calling off the wedding would be the hardest thing she had ever done, that people would be angry and confused and judgmental, that her family might not understand for a long time or possibly ever, but living a lie would be harder in the long run, and Claire deserved to build a life that felt authentic rather than obligatory. Evelyn also made something very clear. She wasn't asking Claire to blow up her life for the possibility of a relationship between them. Whatever happened next, whether Claire chose to explore what was growing between them or needed time alone to figure out who she was, Evelyn would support her. This had to be Claire's choice, made for herself, not for anyone else. Breaking off the engagement was every bit as devastating as Evelyn had warned. Daniel was hurt and angry, cycling through disbelief and accusations and finally heartbroken acceptance. Claire's mother wept and accused her of ruining everything, of embarrassing the family, of throwing away a good man for selfish reasons she clearly wasn't mature enough to explain. Her father retreated into disappointed silence. Friends took sides. The wedding was canceled with frantic phone calls and difficult conversations. Deposits lost, reputations damaged. Claire moved out of the apartment she had shared with Daniel and into a tiny studio that felt both terrifyingly empty and liberating. She walked through those first weeks in a fog of grief and relief, mourning the loss of relationships and stability while simultaneously feeling like she could breathe fully for the first time in her life. Evelyn kept her promise, giving Claire space while remaining a steady presence at the periphery. They texted occasionally, brief messages that were supportive but not presumptuous. 3 weeks after the canceled wedding, Claire showed up at the courthouse again, and this time when they looked at each other, something shifted. They sat on those front steps and talked for hours, Claire explaining what she was learning about herself, Evelyn sharing her own journey of self-discovery and the challenges of living authentically in a world that didn't always make space for people like them. When the sun began to set and Evelyn stood to leave, Claire reached for her hand and asked if she wanted to get dinner. The smile that lit up Evelyn's face was worth every difficult conversation and lost relationship of the previous weeks. Their relationship unfolded slowly, built on a foundation of friendship and honest communication, rather than desperate escape or rebound impulse. Evelyn introduced Claire to a community of women who understood the complexity of coming out later in life, of rebuilding identity from the ground up, of learning to trust yourself when you had spent years denying your own truth. Claire started working on her business plan for the design studio she had always dreamed about, finding courage in Evelyn's example of choosing passion over security. They navigated the challenges of new love with care and intention, talking through fears, establishing boundaries, building trust brick by brick like Evelyn restored her buildings. When they kissed for the first time, standing in the nearly completed courthouse under a chandelier, Evelyn had painstakingly restored to its original glory. Claire felt something slot into place inside her chest, a sense of rightness so profound it brought tears to her eyes. If this story has moved you, if you've ever struggled with living authentically or choosing your truth over other people's expectations, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Your engagement helps stories like Claire and Evelyn's reach others who are fighting the same battles, feeling the same fears, looking for the courage to choose themselves. 6 months after calling off her wedding, Claire stood in the courthouse. On the day it reopened to the public after Evelyn's restoration, the building was magnificent. Its original beauty revealed and honored, while being transformed into something functional and alive. Claire's mother was there, having slowly begun the painful process of trying to understand her daughter's choices, their relationship still fragile but moving toward healing. As Claire watched Evelyn give a speech about preservation and second chances and buildings that find new purpose when given the care they deserve, she understood that Evelyn could have been talking about people too, about Claire herself. Please leave a comment below sharing your story. Have you ever had to choose between living authentically and meeting others' expectations? What gave you the courage to choose yourself? Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. That night, lying in Evelyn's arms in the apartment they had recently decided to share, Claire reflected on the woman she had been 6 months ago, standing in her childhood bedroom staring at that wedding dress. She had thought her choice was between safety and destruction, between duty and selfishness. But she had learned that the real choice was between slow death and difficult rebirth, between a life of careful performance and the terrifying freedom of being fully seen and fully herself. Loving Evelyn wasn't about running away from responsibility or indulging in forbidden passion. It was about finally running toward the truth of who she had always been, toward a future built on authenticity rather than obligation, toward a love that felt less like a choice and more like coming home to herself. And in that homecoming, in that brave act of self-recognition and self-honoring, Claire discovered that the love others had called forbidden was actually the destiny she had been searching for all along.